Okay. Hello there. As far as you know, my name is Violet. I said that already. This is the second episode. We get the story. You know what we're reading, and now we're going on with it. So we're back on page 14, and basically he had kind of not necessarily convinced his mother that uh, for him to be able to join. Uh, so, but she's kind of going with it and trying to tell him what to do and what not to do. So let's just pick right up right there. Okay, so still, when he had looked back from the gate, he had seen his mother kneeling among the potato parings. Her brown face upraised and was stained with tears, and her spare form was quivering. He bowed his head and went on, feeling suddenly ashamed for his purposes. From his home he had gone to a seminary to bid adieu to his many schoolmates. They had thronged about him with wonder and admiration. He had felt the gulf now between them, and had swelled with calm pride. He and some of his fellows who had donned blue were quite overwhelmed with privileges for all of one afternoon, and it had been a very delicious thing. They had strutted, like peacocks. A certain A certain light-haired girl had made vivacious fun at his martial spirit, but there was another and darker girl whom he had gazed at steadfastly, and he thought he grew demure and sad at sight of his blue and brass. As she had walked down the path between the rows of oaks, he had turned his head and detected her at a window watching his departure. As he perceived her, she had immediately begun to stare through the high tree branches at the sky. He had seen a good deal of flurry and haste in her movement as she changed her attitude. He often thought of it. On the way to Washington, his spirit had soared. The regiment was fed and caressed at station after station until the youth had believed that he must be a hero. There was a lavish expenditure of bread and cold meats, coffee and pickles and cheese. That sounds good. As he basked in the smiles of the girls and was patted and complimented by the old men, he had felt growing within him the strength to do mighty deeds of arms. After complicated journeys with many pauses, there had come months of monotonous life in a camp. He had the belief that real war was a series of death struggles with small time in between for sleep and meals. But since his regiment had come to the field, the army had done little but sit still and try to keep warm. He was brought then gradually back to his old ideas. Green-like struggles would be no more. Men were better or more timid. Secular and religious education had effaced the throat-grappling instinct, or else firm finance held in a check of the passions. For somebody who talks so southern, he has such detailed thoughts. Anyways, he had grown to regard himself merely as part of a vast blue demonstration. His province was to look out as far as he could, for his personal comfort. For recreation, he could twiddle his thumbs and speculate on the thoughts which must agitate the minds of the generals. Also, he was drilled and reviewed and drilled and drilled and reviewed. The only foes he had seen were some pickets along the river bank. They were a sun-tanned, philosophical lot who sometimes shot reflectively at the blue pickets. When reproached for this afterward, they usually expressed sorrow and swore by their gods that the guns had exploded without their permission. Ugh. The youth on guard duty one night conversed across the stream with one of them. He was a slightly ragged man who spat skillfully between his shoes and possessed a great fund of bland and infantile assurance. The youth liked him personally. "Yank," the other had informed him. "You're a right dumb good feller." This sentiment floating to him upon the still air had made him temporarily regret war. Various veterans had told him tales. Some talked of gray, bewhiskered hordes who were advancing with relentless curses and chewing tobacco with unspeakable valor. Tremendous bodies of fierce soldiery who were sweeping along like the Huns. Others spoke of tattered and eternally hungry men who fired despondent powders. They'll charge through hills and fire and brimstone to get a hold of a haversack haversack and such stomachs ain't lasting long, he was told. From the stories, the youth imagined the red live bones sticking out through slits in the faded uniforms. Still, he could not put a whole faith in veterans' tales, for recruits were their prey. They talked much of smoke, fire, and blood, but he could not tell how much might be lies. They persistently yelled fresh fish at him and were in no wise to be trusted. However, he perceived now that it did not greatly matter what kind of soldiers he was going to fight, so long as they fought, which fact no one disputed. There was a more serious problem. He lay in a bunk pondering upon it. He tried to mathematically prove to himself that he would not run from a battle. Previously, he had never obliged to wrestle too seriously with the question. In his life, he had taken certain things for granted, never challenging his belief in ultimate success and bothering little about means and roads. But here he was confronted with a thing of a movement. It had suddenly appeared to him that perhaps in a battle he might run. He was forced to admit that as far as war was concerned, he knew nothing of himself. A sufficient time before he would have allowed the problem to kick its heels at the outer portals of his mind, but now he felt compelled to give serious attention to it. A little panic fear grew in his mind. As his imagination went forward to a fight, he saw hideous possibilities. He contemplated the lurking menaces of the future, and failed in an effort to see himself standing stoutly in the midst of them. He recalled his visions of broken-bladed glory, but in the shadow of the impending tumult, he suspected them to be impossible pictures. He sprang from the bunk and began to pace nervously to and fro. "Good Lord, what the matter with me?" he said aloud. He felt that in this crisis his laws of life were useless. Whatever he had learned himself was there of no avail. He was of unknown quantity. He saw what he would again be obliged to experiment as he had in early youth. He must accumulate information of himself, and meanwhile he resolved to remain close upon his guard, lest those qualities of which he knew nothing should everlastingly disgrace him. "Good Lord!" he repeated in dismay. Gosh, I read that like Medea. I haven't even watched that. After a time, the tall soldier slid dexterously through the hole. The loud private followed. They were wrangling. "That's all right," said the tall soldier as he entered. He waved his hand expressively. "You can believe me or not, just as you like. All you got to do is sit down and wait as quiet as you can. Then pretty soon you'll find out I was right." His comrade grunted stubbornly. For a moment he seemed to be searching for a formidable reply. Finally he said, "Well, you don't know everything in the world, do you?" Sorry. "Didn't say I knew everything in the world," retorted the other sharply. He began to stow various articles snugly into his knapsack. Oh, and this is the picture, by the way. I don't know if you need to see that or not. I don't even think you can see that. The youth, pausing in the nervous walk, looked down at the busy figure. "Going to be a battle, sure, is there, Jim?" he asked. "Of course there is," replied the tall soldier. "Of course there is. You just wait till tomorrow, and you'll see one of the biggest battles ever was. You just wait." "Thunder!" said the youth. "Oh, you'll see frightening this time, my boy. What'll be regular out-and-out fighting," added the tall soldier with an air of a man who is about to exhibit a battle for the benefit of his friends. "Huh?" said the loud one from a corner. "Well," remarked the youth, "like as not this story'll turn out just like the others did." "Not much it won't," replied the tall soldier, exasperated. "Not much it won't. Didn't the cavalry all start this morning?" He glared about them. No one denied the statement. "The cavalry started this morning," he continued. "They say there ain't hardly any cavalry left in the camp. They're going to Richmond or someplace, while we fight on the Johnnies. It's some dodge like that. The regiment's got orders, too. A feller that seen 'em go to headquarters told me a little while ago. And they're raising blazes all over that camp. Anybody can see that." "Shucks," said a loud one. The youth remained silent for a time. At last he spoke to a tall soldier. "Jim!" "What?" "How do you think the regiment'll do?" "Oh, they'll fight all right, I guess, after they once get into it." And the other, with cold judgment, he made a fine use of the third person. "There been heaps of fun poked at 'em because they're new, of course, and all that, but they'll fight all right, I guess." Think any of the boys will run? Persisted the youth. Oh, there may be a few of them run, but there's them kind in every regiment, especially when the first goes under fire, said the other in a tolerant way. Of course, it might happen that the whole kit and caboodle might start and run if some fighting came first off, and then again they might stay and fight like fun. But you can't bet on nothing. Of course, they ain't never been under fire yet. And it ain't likely that they'll lick the whole rebel army all at once the first time, but I think they'll fight better than some, if worse than others. That's the way I figure. They call the regiment fresh fish and everything, but the boys come of good stock, and most of them will fight like sin after the once get it shooting. He added with a mighty emphasis on the last 4 words. Oh, I neglected to do that. I did not read ahead. Oh, you think you know? Began the loud soldier with scorn. The other turned savagely upon him. They had a rapid altercation, in which they fastened upon each other various strange epithets. The youth at last interrupted them. Did you ever think you might run yourself, Jim? He asked on concluding sentence. He laughed as if he meant to aim a joke. The loud soldier also giggled. The tall private waved his hand. Well, he said profoundly, I've thought it might get too hot for Jim Conklin. Conklin, that's an interesting name. In some of them scrimmages, and a whole lot of boys started to run. Why, I supposed I'd start and run. And if I once started to run, I'd run like the devil, and no mistake. But if anybody was a-standing and a-fighting, why, I'd stand and fight. Be Jiminy, I would, I'd bet on it. Huh? Said the loud one. The youth of this tale felt gratitude for his words and of his comrade. He had feared that all the untried men possessed a great and correct confidence. He now was in a measure reassured. And that's the end of chapter 1. Should I go ahead and go on to chapter 2? No? Just wrap it up? Alright. So, the next one's going to be chapter 2. Guess I'll see y'all next time. Leave a comment if you like. Leave a like also if you like. Descriptions down below, and I'm sure if there's anything else, he'll leave something on the screen. Bye.